Hi, this is Larry with Man Cave Mayhem. Behind me is a 2009 Yamaha Majesty scooter, 400cc, and the dreaded V-belt light came on, so it's basically a service warning saying, hey, you need to change your V-belt. So that's what we're gonna do today. We've already canceled out the warning light. This scooter has roughly 14,000 miles on it. It's a little dusty because coming off of COVID and winter storage, it hasn't been cleaned yet, so I'm getting things squared away because we're gonna be doing some trips. So we're gonna be focusing on this area right here. So we gotta get into this and start getting some of these plastics off. So we'll go through that and then we'll show you what we need to get that belt out. What we wanna start off with on this thing is a good quality belt. This is a Yamaha belt. I've went the cheap route before. I don't recommend it, so I went with a factory belt. A little bit more pricey. This is the number on it. The part number is 5 Robert Union 1764100, and that's for this scooter. So we're gonna set that aside. Also, you might want a tool for taking the it's not necessarily needed for taking the clutch apart or taking the variator off, but it's definitely needed when you're putting it back on, just because you're going to want to torque that down, and so you don't want to just impact that down. I usually use an impact to take everything off, but you want to use a torque wrench to put it back together. So let's get started. We're going to start taking these plastics off and we'll go from there. All right, so I've actually got part of the air box off. As you can see, this filter is pretty dirty. The strange thing is I just changed this, so these things get dirty pretty quick. So this is something you want to check. Also, this is basically the plastic cover that covers the actual metal cover. So we're gonna pull this off. There's these bigger screws that hold that on, and a couple of smaller screws that are in the air box, and you can see the screws that go around the air box there. So I'm going to go ahead and finish getting these off, and we'll go from there. You have to be very careful because these things are just full of plastic, and there's all kinds of screws all over the place. I'm not going to go into the details on all these screws, but you can see all the screw holes, everything necessary to getting this plastic off. Just be careful and cautious as you're pulling these plastics off that you don't break anything. I've snapped a few clips before in the past. Another thing, you might want to take the spring off your kickstand just to have it lay down, or put it up on the kickstand. I failed to do that before I put it up on the lift, so I'll probably just drop the kickstand, unhook the spring, or I'll drop the lift and put it on its center stand first. Now I've got this first cover off. This is your CVT filter, the air filter. It keeps all the dirt and crap out of your CVT belt. You want to make sure you keep this thing clean. This one's dirty, but it's got 14,000 miles on it, so I really can't say that it's too bad. But you could probably blow this out and get away with reusing it, or if you're feeling really anal, you can replace it. But you just want to make sure that thing's clean. So I'm going to pull that off, set that aside. Now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty. We'll have this cover off here in a minute, and I can show you the secondary cover that's on this thing. You can see the fins on this fan. This helps cool the belt. So this will blow air up into the belt housing, and it helps cool the belt as you're driving. So you definitely want to make sure this is clean. It's obviously clean on the other side, but it just needs to be probably replaced, this one. So there's going to be some parts that are going to need to be ordered, but we're going to go ahead and keep tearing the cover we want to get off here. So we have all these small little, they look like either 8 or 10 millimeter bolts that we're going to need to take out of this thing. This one's pretty rusted here, but we're going to go through and pull those. And it looks like we got a 12 millimeter here that needs to be taken off, so we'll start on that. Get all the bolts out of this. These were all 8 millimeter, and then a 10 millimeter here, or 12 millimeter here. This is on pretty snug because it kind of slides over the bearings and stuff. So you want to be careful taking this off. It's tough to get off, But make sure everything's off, all the bolts, because you don't want to break anything. This is kind of cast aluminum. So a lot of times I like to take a rubber mallet and gently tap on it while I'm pulling it. You know, just kind of give it a little tap. You can kind of hear that it's loose. So I would just kind of tap that while I'm pulling on it with the other hand and just slowly get it off. So that's what we're doing next. This cover is now off, but it was a pain in the butt. So just be aware, it's not an easy thing to get that cover off. This bearing kind of sits there. So what I ended up doing is just putting just a touch, sprayed a little bit of dry lube on that. And it was just enough to get it to release on this side. You got O-rings here that kind of grab that and seal it. But yeah, this belt, it feels like it's kind of worn. I can feel the edges of it, but it's this is the required maintenance on this after 14,000 miles. So it's done well, and so now we're gonna impact these off, and we'll take a look and inspect. We'll inspect the clutch and check out the variator, make sure all the rollers are good. If they're not, I might go to some Dr. Pulley rollers, but we'll see. So let's get to it. When you're pulling this thing apart, make sure you put the things back the way you took them off, and that always helps me remember because I'm getting old and senile. So I try to kind of keep things semi-organized as I'm putting things back, so I know how they go back on. So we're gonna get this pulled off now. Get the clutch off, or clutch drum off. See how these shoes are looking. Clutch is actually looking really good. The shoes got a lot of meat on them. There's a little crap on this one shoe. I thought it's just dust, but it doesn't look bad at all. So that clutch is good to go as far as I'm concerned. And now we're going to pull that variator apart and take a look at that. All right, so we've inspected the clutch. It needs to be cleaned up a little bit. This needs to be, you know, the drum actually needs to be kind of scored just a little bit to clean it up. We'll wipe all this down. I haven't actually looked at the rollers, so that's what we're looking at right now. These are all the rollers. What you want to look for on these rollers is to make sure there isn't any flat spots. Make sure that they're perfectly round and in good shape. So far they look pretty good. There's not any real flat spots on them. There's only 14,000 miles on them, so they're not bad. Now I could replace these with Dr. Pulley's, but these look really good, and I'm not gonna worry about it. I think I'm just gonna clean them up and put them back together. There's a lot of brake dust and stuff in this thing, so these little plastic pieces, they slide in here and sit in here. So we're going to take this all apart, clean this up. We're going to clean this all out, wipe it out. You don't want any oil or any grease in there. These are kind of I don't know what kind of materials on them, but they're a hard plastic or a hard composite brake material or something. So we'll clean this all up. And these rollers, they sit down in these journals right here. And as you accelerate, they roll out, and that loosens or tightens the two halves and changes your gear ratio as you go. So, and then obviously the centrifugal clutch here, as you accelerate, it expands, tightens on this drum, and causes you to have drive. So that's how that whole system works. It's very simple, very efficient, works great, but you just have to keep it maintained. So all these just kind of drop in here like this, and then that cover goes back on it. See, they just sit in here. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to clean these up. Just make sure you wipe them down real good. You don't want anything oily or greasy on them. And that's how they sit in there. And this cover will flip over and land right on that. We'll pull this sleeve out, re-grease it, make sure it's got enough grease and everything. But this, we'll dump them out. But this sleeve right here, this slide goes up and down, so we'll make sure that that's cleaned up and lubricated pretty good, so we don't have any issues, because that's what actually varies the speed on your bike. So we'll get that going and get it all cleaned up, and we'll start reassembling things. These rollers all clean and dry. We're going to set these in. Just drop them in like this. Get them all in their various locations, and that's how that sets in that. Now you might want to check this sleeve for grease. This thing seems pretty well greased. I might put just a little touch on, but you want to go real light on the grease, because this thing's centrifugally ran, so when it starts spinning up, you know, you fling grease. So you don't want to get grease all in this. You want to keep this dry and clean. So now we're going to put this cover on. So this cover sits in here like this. But the main thing you need to do is you got to put these little spacers in there. They're little slides, I should say. So we'll put those on next. And you want these, you don't want them facing like this with the V up. You want them like this. It's pretty straightforward, you can tell by the way it's designed. And then this will just set right on here like so, if I can get it in there right. And that's how that works. And then this will move accordingly. See how that moves up and down? And those rollers are what actually move that. As they move out, it pushes this out. As it slows down, it pushes it back in. And that's how that variator works. And so this goes like this. And then this is the fan side of it. And it goes right on here, like so. Well, no, yeah, it'll go on there somewhere like that. Of course, this will be squeezed up tighter. But that's kind of how that works. And then this is just like a giant brake, which engages it as the springs open up. Those brake pads hit that drum, and it actually, that's the clutch. That's how that works. All right, now that we got this compartment all cleaned out, I used a light dusting of some brake cleaner. Just carefully, though. I didn't want to get on the seals with it. Now we're going to put this half of the variator in. Slide that on. And once we get that on and settled back in there, I'm going to carefully do this because you don't want those rollers getting knocked out of there. Make sure this face is real clean before you do anything. Now we're going to get this half put on now. When you put this belt on, when you put the belt on this, you want to get this thing compressed enough to get the belt in there. The belt's got to be in probably about 1/4 of an inch in order for that thing to go on right. So we're going to try and squeeze that belt in there before we put it in. I'll see if that works. All right, before you put the belt on, you want to look at your belt too and make sure, because this one has arrows on it, see? So you want to know which direction that goes. So it's going to spin this way. So that's the direction you want that belt going. And just compare it, make sure that it's the same belt. If there's numbers on this belt, make sure they coincide with the other belt, and they do. So we're going to go ahead and get this thing, force this thing on here. So like I said, you kind of have to squeeze this onto this thing. It's going to be a little bit challenging, but I think we can do it. All right, we got the new belt in. You want to get that belt over this ridge. Otherwise, nothing else will go together. So, and also this is a directional belt. You want the arrows running this way. So just make sure that you keep an eye on that. At least if you're using a Yamaha belt, it's definitely a directional belt, and I'm sure all the other ones are too. But anyhow, you kind of have to work on this. See how far I got the belt in on this? You kind of have to squeeze it and let it turn. And as it turns, you kind of work the belt in there, and that'll allow you to get that over this ridge. So that's where we are right now. We're going to go ahead and start putting the covers back on, or we're going to put the clutch drum back on, and then we'll put the variator, the other half of the variator back on, and then we'll start bolting things up here. All right, now we got this thing in. I took the clutch drum and kind of just roughed it up a little bit with some emery cloth. Just knocked some of the glaze off that. And what we're going to do now is we're going to slide that in. There's also a little washer that you don't want to miss right here that slides in here. You don't want to lose that or forget that. So that goes in right there behind this bad boy. And this will slide on here like so. And once I find the proper spot, boom, it's in. So there she is. So you can see what I'm talking about. When that freewheels, the wheel can spin freely. Once the engine revs up fast enough to expand that clutch, the clutches, or the those shoes will come out, expand, grab this, and then you'll have drive. So that's how that works. Anyhow, back to doing what we need to do. We're gonna go ahead and put the other half of this on. We're gonna loosely bolt this down, and then we're gonna go ahead and torque it to the specs required. So the brake, or I mean the clutch, is 60 foot-pounds or 40 foot-pounds, and the front variator is 60 foot-pounds. So that's what we're gonna torque it to. We'll get to that now. Now we got that torqued down, we got the cover on it. We're gonna do everything now in reverse and start throwing it back together. So again, 40 foot-pounds and 65 or 60 foot-pounds of torque on those. So, and you need some kind of tool. I had to modify this one to make it work, but they're cheap. You can get them on Amazon for about 12 bucks. So anyhow, I'm gonna start throwing the cover back on. We'll get this thing buttoned. All right, so we got this Bad Motor scooter all buttoned up now. We'll take her for a test drive, but everything's gonna be good on this for another 14,000 miles. The wife and I are gonna blow the dust off these things and start using them again. We've had them kind of in cold storage for a year, you know, with all this COVID thing going on. So, but just remember, when you're working on something like this, just take your time, keep track of everything so you know where to put it back. There's plenty of videos out there. I hope this video helps you guys. If you have any questions, put them in the, make a comment, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. I try to answer all my comments. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and just remember, I'm just a man in a cave causing mayhem. Thanks again for watching.